questions I get asked a lot is, how do you justify a strong business case or ROI around, having a better service integration layer or SIAM layer? Well, there's probably three areas of sort of return on investment that organizations can avail themselves of in better managing their multi-sourced environment. The first of which is around service quality. The second one would be looking at things like asset management, and the third one is around managing the contracts, the outsourced contracts themselves. So when we deal with the first one around service quality, well, there's a lot that can be gained in terms of eliminating outages. That's one area where there's a lot of cost that is borne by the organization when things go wrong. So what happens when email goes down, or when a trading system goes down, or when SAP goes down? Well, that has a massive knock-on effect to the business. So what are the things in place to ensure that those outages are avoided altogether, or maybe that there's a better process for managing that? Often we see that being a particular issue when you've got, say, the application layer sitting with an application service provider, you've got the network providing network services through an outsourcer, and you've also got the infrastructure hosting with another vendor. So each one will be making their own KPIs or service levels, but yet there's not a central sort of end user view of those services, and so therefore it's very difficult to be proactive. So that's an area where there's a lot that can be saved. Some application performance monitoring can really help as well at that sort of end user level, where we're looking at sort of end user sessions and those kind of KPIs to make sure that even though maybe the service is available, maybe a subset of users are calling into the service desk with issues. So these are all tickets that can be avoided and so on. So there's really good kind of intangible cost avoidance type business benefits, and at the same time there's also some really good benefits around things like ticket reduction and so on. The second area is around asset management. That's a really strong area to focus on, and this can be everything from end-of-life management through to application rationalization, through to better management of hardware and software. A typical example is that you're looking at software license reconciliation, where you've got information sitting in each of the towers. Say take Oracle for example. You might have the infrastructure guys responsible for database licenses. You might have the application guys responsible for user-based licensing of Oracle services, and it's very difficult for the retained organization to get a unified view of their licensing position. So when Oracle come knocking requesting a license audit, it's very difficult to avoid the audit if you don't have very good data. So that's an area where often we see a lot of pain, and where companies or organizations can save a lot of money in terms of cost avoidance and better management of software licensing and license harvesting. The other one is hardware management as well. So especially when you're looking at sort of end-of-life refreshes or transformations, where having good visibility of what is actually already deployed is really helpful, because you might be doing, say, a Wi-Fi refresh, and without knowing what the underlying network infrastructure is and what versions and what sort of end-of-life position you've got there, you may go into a project thinking it's going to cost a lot less than it might if you have to also upgrade your switches, for example. So that's another area. And finally, also looking at sort of a lot of the hardware components, and are they being run well from a utilization perspective. That brings me on to the third point as well. So when you're looking at the vendor contracts, it may not be in the vendor's interest or the outsourcer's interest to specifically migrate services out of, say, a data center and into a public cloud service, because of the fact that ultimately they're paid on the services sitting within their hosting. So there's some examples where it may not be in their best interest to provide a view of what's going on. So things like normalization of vendor contracts and having the right service levels around things like capacity or utilization can really drive a very strong return, and can help keep in check some of the costs that you see within certain towers of your service integration and management structure, or your multi-sourced organization. So having a target operating model that caters for good checks and balances around things like capacity, monitoring, provisioning, and so on, can really help to to mitigate some of the change costs and some of the costs that are being incurred through the various towers. And often they're very simple things through that often manifest themselves through a little bit of mismanagement or lack of visibility across the towers. And just by having a little bit better visibility, you can really avoid a lot of the issues. Centralizing service level management as a function, I think, is a really key point, and making sure that you've got the right levers in place to manage each of those contracts, and that you're getting the credits when you need them and when they occur, and there's a proper visibility around that, can really drive a very strong ROI. So there are three different examples of strong return on investment that can be gained through better management of the service integration application management target operating model, and can really avoid a lot of issues. At the end of the day, if something goes wrong, it's the retained organization or the end customer organization that's going to be in the papers, not specifically the outsourcers. So it's really incumbent upon the retained organization to make sure that there's the right levels of control, and there's a really strong return on investment case that can be rolled up to the executive to justify investments in this area.